Okay, so yesterday we studied the model of labor supply, and what we were concerned with yesterday was how to determine the hours of working. Okay, so you know the hours of working, how it changes, for example, when the non-labor income increases or decreases, and how it changes when the wage rate goes up or goes down, right? That's what we have studied yesterday, right? And if we summarize it, basically, if the non-labor income goes up, then what happens to working hours? Increase or decrease? Decrease, right? Because we assume the leisure is a normal good, so when the non-labor income goes up, individuals want more leisure, it means less work. Okay? So it goes down, and it should go up. Okay? And also, we learned how the wage change affects labor supply, number of hours of working. Okay? If wage goes up, what happens to hours of working? Increase? Decrease? Increase, decrease? Or uncertain, which is right? Uncertain, right? So it may go up, go down. Going up part, what effect? Substitution effect. Okay? Then going down part, what effect? Income effect. So the way of thinking is that when the wage goes up, price of leisure goes up, so the individuals want less leisure because it's expensive, so they substitute, okay, substitute consumption for leisure. So that's the substitution effect. And wage go up, then since the individual is likely to have higher income, so the one more leisure means less work. Okay, so combination of income and substitution effect will determine how the number of hours working changes. Okay, may go up or go down, and that's what we learned yesterday. What you're going to do today first is to think about why some individuals work and why some individuals do not work. Okay? So, let me ask you a question. Among you guys, okay, working, okay, here, we define work as working for at least 1 hour a week for pay. That's working. Okay, that's a standard definition of working, statistical definition of working in most countries is if the individual works at least 1 hour, okay, in a week for pay, then we say that person is working, or we say that the person is employed. Okay? So I will just take a survey of you. Among you guys, raise your hand if you are not working. So meaning that I don't work even 1 hour for pay a week. So it's for pay only, okay? If you're doing for hobby or for charity, it's not working. Raise your hand. I'm not working at all. Yeah, don't worry. Okay. Then among you guys, okay, those who are not working, raise your hand. If you are not fine, if you are not looking for work. I'm not looking for work. I'm not looking for work, for pay. I'm not working, and I'm not looking for work. Yeah, right now. For now. Let's say this week. I'm not working. I'm not looking for work. It's quite a lot, right? I'm probably more than half. Okay, it's not something surprising, right? If you ask this question to most full-time students, okay, then absolute majority of them say that I'm not working, okay, or looking for work. Obviously, there are actually students who work, okay, and or are looking for work, but the majority of them are not working or looking for work. Actually, if you think about it, there are actually so many people are like that. For example, like if you look at elderly people, okay, a lot of elderly people are not working or looking for work, right? And let's say there are lots of stay-home parents, okay, stay-home mothers, and sometimes stay-home fathers actually. Those people are not working for pay, even though they work at home, okay, it's not for pay. So this person is not employed in statistical sense, nor looking for work. So we have actually a bunch of people, okay, who are not working or looking for work. Actually, if you look at the statistics, okay, in some countries, these individuals, like 40% of total individuals are not working or looking for work, okay, depending on which country you look at. Okay, so that's the question that we are asking. Why these people are not working or even looking for work? So they're not willing to work, basically, we can say. It's not willing to work. Why? So think about it. Think about yourself. Why are you not working? Okay? The question for you, why you are not working? Okay? Think about it. Now, how can you make that person to work? How can I make you work, for example?
Me work.
Yeah.
Giving me extra cost of pay
Extra.
that I think that I deserve.
Yeah, for example, let's say, okay, I offer your job that pays, let's say, $1 or $1 an hour. How about $10 for an hour?
Well, I'll think about it.
$10 an hour, think about it. 15?
Yeah, sure.
15 and you're gonna work.
50 or 50.
15.
No.
20. 20.
20?
Yeah.
What kind of work is it?
Oh, let's say the work that you can do. Let's say, I don't know, keeping a counter at a, let's say, convenience store.
Yeah.
Clock. Get cashier at the convenience store. $20 per hour.
Oh, yeah, true. Oh, yeah, truly.
Gonna work? Yeah? Yeah? Yeah, so $20 per hour. $20 is enough for her to work. Okay? No, raise your hand. If I get $20 per hour, I will work at a cashier at a convenience store. Okay, some of you. Okay, it's not still enough for me. Raise your hand. $20 is not enough. Raise your hand. Okay. How about if I offer you, let's say, $30 an hour? Gonna work? Raise your hands. I'm gonna work for $30 an hour. No? How about 40? 50?
20 and off.
Okay. Now, if you think about it, actually, you may not think hard enough to why I'm not working. But let's say if you meet a situation where that you actually get a job offer, okay, then think about yourself how you're going to determine whether I'm going to work or not. Actually, the rule, if you think about it, it's pretty simple, right? As you guys did. You will look at the wage offer, right? And then you will think about whether I want to work for that wage. Let's say the job is, let's say cashier or something, the job that you can do. Let's say you are willing to do, okay, if you are paid enough, right? So if you think about it, actually, if you have unlimited amount of money, you can make anybody to work. No? If I offer you, let's say, $1 million an hour, I can make anybody to work. Pretty sure, actually, there are some people, probably Bill Gates probably will reject it. But anyway, even Bill Gates probably will accept an offer, let's say, $10 billion an hour, right? If I offer him enough amount of money, he will work as a cashier at our convenience store. Okay, you will find him, in that place. Okay. So think about it. Actually, a person is not willing to work because that person thinks that the wage offered to him or her is not enough. And not enough means that it's basically, you can think, each individual must have a certain threshold, okay, that is willing to work. Let's say for you, like it's $20. If I am offered $20 or higher, I am willing to work. But that amount of money will be different, right? So for some people, it could be lower, some people could be higher, right? Depending on the person's preference. Some people like, okay, I like leisure a lot, and the person is likely to have higher threshold. And if the person, let's say, is very rich, then it's likely that person has very high threshold. Okay? Still, if that person happens to have a wage offer that goes beyond the threshold, that person is likely to work, right? So it's a pretty simple idea. Why some people is not working? Because that person cannot find a job that satisfies that threshold. That threshold, we call it the reservation wage. It's just that, it's just the term for that threshold we use in economics, reservation wage. Okay? So reservation wage is formally defined as the wage level where an individual is indifferent between participating in the labor market. Actually, I use the term participating in the labor market because I'm just, participating in the labor market means working or looking for work, so willing to work. Okay? But if you think about the perfectly competitive labor market, the person should be working if the person is participating in the labor market. So I'm just saying working. So working and participating in the labor market is pretty much the same in this sense. So the wage level where an individual is really indifferent between working and not working. That's the threshold. So it's like a psychological threshold. Okay, get it? So the individual does not wish to work if wages are lower than the reservation wage. And the wage is higher than the reservation wage will induce the individual to participate in the labor market, right? So if I know an individual's reservation wage and if I have unlimited amount of money, I can make anybody to work. Okay? So you can say that there are a bunch of individuals who find the wages that offered to him or her is lower than the reservation wage, so that person does not work. Okay? That's how we look at working or not working decisions. So comparison between the wage offered and the reservation wage. So the question is, how do we find the reservation wage? What determines the reservation wage? So we use the framework of work leisure choice model to find the reservation wage. Okay? So let's think about it. Okay. So let me draw a diagram, basically the same diagram, but I will just draw a diagram. So L and W, leisure and wage. Okay, then if the individual, think of an individual who are not working. Okay, and that individual should be at this point if the individual is not working. Okay, so at this point, let's say think of an individual who has an indifference curve that looks like this. Okay, and our task is to make that person to work by offering a wage rate that makes this person to work. Okay, now if we know how the indifference curve looks like, okay, then we can figure out that for each wage level whether this person is going to work or not. For example, if I offer that person a wage rate, let's say $2 per hour, very low wage rate, let's say, then it's likely that that person's budget line gonna look like this red one. Okay? It's very flat because the wage rate is pretty low. Okay? I will make it a little more steeper. Very cool. Let's say offer a wage rate that is pretty low. Will this person work? Not likely, right? It's not. Because if you find any point on this budget line, that person's indifference curve is going to look like this, right? So obviously, for any level of work, the person will be actually worse off compared to this one. Worse off meaning that indifference curve is at the lower location than this current one. Okay? So that person is not going to work. Okay? So what we have to do is that obviously we should offer a higher wage rate. Okay? So if we offer a wage rate like this, would that person work? No, right? Still not enough. Okay? What if we offer a wage rate like this? Gonna work? Gonna work, right? Obviously it's something like, probably something like this, right? Now if we think of reservation wage, that means that this line, the slope of this one is lower than the reservation wage, right? That's why this person is not working. This person's, the wage offered is below the threshold, okay? And this slope made that person to work, right? That means that this slope, the wage rate of this one is higher than the reservation wage. Okay? So if we are going to find the reservation wage for that person, for that particular person, it should be lower than this, right? It should be higher than this. Okay? So let's do that until we find the point, find the slope that makes that person just at the threshold. How do we do that? Actually, if you think about it, we make it that a little higher or a little lower, then at the end, where we're going to end up is like this one. In this diagram, it should be this thick red one. Why is it special about thick red one? This thick red one touches point E. At this point, the slope of this thick red line is equal to the slope of the indifference curve at this point E. Okay? So if you think of it, you just twist a little bit and make it steeper than this one, then you'll find that person gonna work. And if you make that a little lower, a little flatter than this one, then this person will surely not work. Like this one not working, like that one working. So this line actually gives us the reservation wage for that person. Okay? So you can say that reservation wage is given as the slope of the indifference curve at the point E. We can say at the point of not working. Okay? Get it? Okay. So that's what we have found. So okay, this one is a bit different. Now let's think of this one, the second one. What affects an individual's reservation wage? First, if you think about it, the reservation wage will depend on, first, what's the shape of the indifference curve. If the indifference curve is flatter, the reservation wage will be lower or higher. Should be lower. If that indifference curve is steeper, then reservation wage must be higher. Okay? Because it just depends on the slope. Okay? Now, if you recall our, I think, discussion yesterday, the indifference curve becomes steeper if the person has stronger taste for leisure. Okay? So it makes sense. If the individual has a stronger taste for leisure, this person's reservation wage must be higher because that person likes leisure a lot, so it takes more higher wage to make that person to work. So that makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. Okay? So first thing is how the shape of indifference curve looks like. So among you guys, some of you may have a stronger taste for leisure, and some of you have relatively weaker taste for leisure or stronger taste for consumption. I like consume. Okay, some probably I like free time. Then the individuals who have stronger taste for leisure gonna likely to have higher reservation wage, and those who have stronger taste for consumption likely to have lower reservation wage. Right? So for the same wage offered, some will work, some will not. Okay? Right? So it makes sense. Okay, then second thing that affects the reservation wage is non-labor income. Actually, if you think about it, if you make this distance higher, okay, so make it higher, let's say. Then reservation wage will be higher. It's going to be steeper, that slope. It's difficult to see in the diagram. I'm going to say it. Okay. No, if you think about it, actually it makes a perfect intuitive sense. Okay. Let's say you have high. Let's say you have, it's. Did I give you that same example? Let's say you find the recently deceased uncle that gave you a $1 million in inheritance. Okay? Okay? How it will make you, in terms of working? For me, $1 million is a little not that much. But anyway, okay? But I'm pretty sure that it's not likely to make that particular individual more likely to work. Probably some individuals are gonna quit the job, right? For example, if you think of lottery winners, right? Lots of lottery winners, they quit the job. Okay, what happens? And what happens is that their non-labor income goes up, then it is intuitively natural that that person's reservation wage should go up, right? Richer people are less willing to work for, let's say, the same wage rate. Okay? If I offer, let's say, $10 per hour to a very poor person, that person is more likely to work than a richer person. Okay? So what we can say is the second point is the individual's non-labor income gonna be affected by the non-labor income will. Higher non-labor income will make that individual's reservation wage to go up. Okay, so preference and non-labor income will affect the reservation wage. Okay, I'm gonna explain the first part. Okay, so think of an individual who's not, let's say, think of a group of individuals. Okay? So this group of individuals, and let's say if we increase wage rate for that group of individuals, let's think of this part. Okay. Let's say the wage rate, let's say, I'm just saying W0, W1. Wage rate goes up from W0 to W1. Okay? then we can ask whether this person gonna increase working hour or decrease working hour. Wage goes up, then what should happen? Increase or decrease for that particular person. This person was not working at the wage rate of W0. Let's say wage rate goes up to W1. Will this person work more or work less? More or less? Think of income and substitution effect. Okay? By substitution effect, will this person work more or less? By substitution effect. Wage goes up, so work more, right? Substitution effect. How about the income effect? Work less, it seems, but does this person have income effect? Think about it. This person was not working at all. Wage goes up. This person does not work. What happens to this person's income? The person was not working, right? Wage goes up. What happens to this person's income? Same, right? Okay? So, there is no income effect. Income effect happens only when the individual's income increase if the individual keeps the same number of hours work. Okay? So this person was not working, so there was no earnings. Okay? Wage go up, still, if that person keeps the same position, okay, same behavior, the income would not change at all. So there cannot be an income effect, only the substitution effect. Anyway, that doesn't make any sense to decrease labor supply from 0 hour to what? Right? So there can be only one direction actually. But if you think about it, if the person does not change the behavior, the income does not change. But normally if the person was working, their wage go up, then even if this person doesn't change anything, the income will increase. Right? But since this person is not working at all, there is no income effect. Okay? So when the wage go up, okay, for individuals who are already working, we cannot say for sure whether that person is going to work more or work less. But if the wage goes up, then we can say surely that for some people, they will increase working hours. Okay? So I said the group of people, so let's think of group of individuals. Okay? Then let's say for that group, wage go up. Okay? Then we cannot say for sure that whether the individuals who are already working, among the group, we don't know whether as a group they're going to work more or work less. But we can say for sure that there will be more people who are going to work. Okay? So that's the first part. So rise in the wage rate, increase the labor force participation rate of a group of workers. So an increase in the wage rate of a non-worker does not generate a non-income effect. Okay? Only the substitution effect. For example, like if you look at the labor force participation rate of women over the past, let's say, 40 years, 50 years. In most countries, it has been increasing. Okay? In Korea or in any other country, it has been increasing. So more and more women joining the labor force, okay, compared to, let's say, 50 years ago. Okay? And one thing we can say is, why are more of them are working? Okay, there may be many reasons, but one reason actually we can suggest is over time, women's wage rate has increased. Okay? So since the women's wage rate has increased, that makes more women to join the workforce. Okay? Actually, if you look at the statistics, then in a country where that wage rate has increased by large percentage, they generally see a larger a relatively large increase of labor force participation among women. Okay. In this particular course, I'm not going to talk about it too much about it because that's not the focus of this one. But if you're interested, take my labor economics course. Okay. Then I will talk a lot more detail about it. Okay. Now, let's see that labor supply behavior of an individual now in aggregation. Think of an individual that whose wage rate is, let's say, very low, $2. Then we can say probably this person is not going to work because that is lower than the reservation wage. Okay? So when the wage goes up, then let's say the wage, let's say $15, then this individual is going to work like that number of hours. Okay, number of hours is counting from T to the left. Okay, number of hours to this. So we can do actually then like this exercise that let's say for any wage rate, okay, like $25, then work more. So what effect dominates what? Substitution effect dominates income effect. $35. Let's say like this. Now, which effect dominates which? Income effect dominates substitution effect. Okay. So if we understand how the individuals determine whether they work or not and how many hours to work, then we can actually show that for each wage rate, how many hours this person gonna work. Okay. If that wage rate is below the reservation wage, then the number of hours working is 0. Okay, because this person is not going to work. And then when the wage goes up, then depending on substitution and income effect, it may increase or decrease. Normally, theoretically, you can show actually when wage goes up, at first, substitution effect is stronger than the income effect. And later, income effect tends to dominate the substitution effect, meaning that at first, when the wage goes up, then labor supply, number of hours increases. Then at some point, when the wage goes up enough, then reverse happens. So wage goes up, then number of hours working gonna decrease. So if you draw a diagram that shows that wage rate and the desired work hours, then what we get is labor supply curve. What we do is that basically we figure out the individual's choices, then we just map them in this diagram. So let's say if the individual's reservation wage is $2 and below $2, no, 0 hour. And above $2, this individual is going to work. At first, substitution effect dominates income effect. So when wage goes up, then desired work hours are going to increase. And let's say $25 and above, income effect dominates substitution effect, so gonna decrease. Okay? So this is a typical shape of individual labor supply curve. So for each individual, you can say that each individual have this labor supply curve. Okay? It's gonna be different from individual to individual because obviously individuals have different preference and different non-labor income, right? So some individuals may have stronger taste for leisure than the person gonna have, let's say, higher reservation wage, and the slope gonna be different, and this threshold gonna be different as well. Some individuals may have very high threshold, some individuals may have very low threshold. But anyway, we can say that each individual has his or her own labor supply curve. Then we say that's individual labor supply curve. Okay? Get it? And if we aggregate them to a market, then we get actually market labor supply curve. Okay? So now, why did we study this? Okay? Later, what we are going to do is that we're going to look at, let's say, social welfare programs or social insurance programs. Quite often, those programs will change the individual's budget constraint. For example, one example is, let's say, think of like a social welfare program. Think about lower income individual. What does the social welfare program is in very simple form, it's just giving money to lower income individuals. Okay? That will obviously change that individual's budget constraint. Okay? It's going to change, for example, non-labor income. It may also affect actually the wage rate that the person is concerned about. That one we will see later. So anyway, so what happens here is that a lot of social programs going to change that individual's budget constraint, then using our model of work leisure choice model, then we can analyze using that model how it affects that individual's labor supply decision. Okay? So that's how we're going to use it later. So just remember, okay, that this model will show up, this work leisure choice model will show up very often, okay, throughout the semester. Any questions? Okay. Here I just, I'm just telling you again, the theory I gave you it's just a very basic essence of the whole theory. Okay, there are a lot more to that actually. In my labor economics course, I usually spend at least 1.5 weeks, 2 weeks to talk about only labor supply. Okay, so just that's what I'm just saying. Okay, now let's move on to labor demand. So we have looked at supply side. Now let's look at the demand side. So demand side, basically what we are concerned about later, obviously, is the labor demand curve. Okay. Then what is a labor demand curve? Okay, labor demand in the market economy comes from the producers, okay, the farms. Okay. Farms hire labor and capital to produce and sell it and make money, make profit. Okay, that's what farms do. So for labor demand, what we should look at is the farm's behavior, okay, the employer's behavior, the producer's behavior. So let's think of production function first. So in the standard model, we assume that there are two inputs, labor and capital, and this producer just makes something out of using labor and capital. So E, we can say the number of employee hours hired by the firm. Employee hours just means the number of employees times number of hours. Okay? So total number of hours that their employees to put into production process. Okay? It can be simplified as, let's say, number of employees. Okay? Sometimes I just treat E as the number of employees, but actually, it doesn't matter most of the time. So no employee hours, and K is just the stock, capital stock. The aggregate stock of land, machines, and other physical inputs. Okay, it's just a standard model of production function. Actually, I'm pretty sure that if you have taken microeconomics course, you should have seen it during that course. Okay. So we can define the marginal product of labor, so additional units of output produced by one more labor input, keeping other input, let's say keeping capital constant. Okay. So we just think of a producer that if they put one more unit of labor into production process, then their output gonna increase. Okay. That increase, that amount of increase, we call it the marginal product of labor. Okay? You can also define marginal product of capital, basically same idea, that labor and capital, we use one more unit of capital, okay? Then their production gonna increase, then with that amount, that increase is called marginal product of capital. Okay? Get it? It's just a standard concept. Okay? And it's important to assume that MPE and MPK are eventually diminishing. Okay? Some people call it the diminishing, what do they call it? Diminishing marginal productivity? Huh? Diminishing returns? No, that's different. Diminishing rate of return or something. Okay, I forgot the name. Anyway, what is important is that if you put more and more labor, let's say, keeping the capital the same, you put more and more people to work, okay, then in general, at first, each individual will contribute a lot to production. But later, you know, that production, that contribution gonna become smaller and smaller and smaller. If it's not, you're going to have a very strange situation. Why? Because every firm will want to have infinite number of employees, right? Let's say if you put more and more employees, let's say each additional employee will contribute more and more to production, then obviously you want more and more people to work, right? Then in that situation, you're going to have very large companies everywhere. Infinite size, you know, because you have more and more, then each individual will give you more and more, right? But obviously that in real world, okay, there are big companies, but we don't have infinite size of companies, right? A lot of companies are actually much smaller. So that, you know, in a way, it's evidence that MPE or MPK must be diminishing at some point. So anyway, we can assume that MPE and MPK are eventually diminishing. Okay, we define marginal product of labor, and here let's define the value of marginal product of labor. What is value of marginal product of labor? It's just the dollar value of the output produced by one extra labor input. So what it means is just simple. You put one additional labor into production, you have that additional product, and you sell it in the market, then how much money you can make. That's the value of marginal product of labor. Okay, that's the value of marginal VMPE. So it's just the price times MPE. Okay? So you can think of VMP as the gain you get by increasing labor input by 1 unit. Okay, what matters is not just how many more units they make. What actually matters is how much money you make out of that product, that additional products. That's the value of marginal product of labor. Okay, VMPK, we can define it a similar way, right? P times MPK. And then for the labor demand, we should separate short run and long run. So what is short run? Short run is just it's a length of period where that capital input cannot be changed. Okay? So capital input, the firms can change labor input pretty quickly. Okay, what they can do is that they can actually, for example, reduce the number of hours of work. Okay, from today, each worker work for, let's say, 1 hour less, or we can say that, okay, 1 hour more. So they can change the labor input pretty quickly, okay? Or they can hire more people, or they can lay off some people. But it's difficult to change the capital size. Why? Obviously, that if they want to buy a machine, it takes time, right? For most, it's not like buying a TV or refrigerator, right? If you're a producer, you need a serious machines that is probably customized for your production line. So probably you order that machine that it will take a few months, could be years to get that thing to your workplace. Or if you want to have larger space, okay, then obviously that you have to take a time to find a place and then buy it and all those things. So obviously that if you compare the adjustment of labor and adjustment of capital, adjustment of capital should take longer time. So when we say short run, it simply means that during that period, during that length of period, the firm cannot change the capital input. They can change only the labor input. So in the short run, we assume the capital input is fixed. Okay, it's a standard. Okay. Okay, so profit maximizing behavior of labor demand I shortened it really. So, the idea is pretty simple. In the short run, you can change only the labor input. Okay? So if you increase, let's say, labor input by 1 unit, let's say that each unit costs you, let's say, $W, the wage rate. Okay? And if you increase E by 1 unit, then your cost gonna increase by W. Okay? But you get gain, okay, by VMPE. Okay? It's marginal cost. You say marginal revenue. Okay? So if you put 1 more unit of labor, it costs you $W, but what you get out of it is BMPE. Okay? So for the firm, what should they do? Okay, simple. If the cost is lower than the gain, okay, gain is greater than the cost, what you should do is that you should put more input because it makes more sense, right? You get more than you pay. So you get more, you increase your labor input. Now, if you increase your labor input, since we said the MPE is going to be diminishing, BMPE will get smaller and smaller, right? And at some point, it's going to be the same. Now, if you increase labor input even more, then what happens is that now the VMPE is going to be smaller than W, right? Okay. Which means that now you are paying too much. You pay $W, but you get actually less than $W. So you shouldn't do it because your profit gonna be smaller. So obviously that logic leads us to BMP should be equals W. Okay. So the simple rule of behavior for the firm is that if the wage rate is $10, what should they do? They should pick a labor input that makes value of marginal product of labor $10. Okay? If it's $20, you should pick the value of marginal product of labor. You should pick a labor input that makes value of marginal product of labor equal to $20. Because your marginal product of labor is going to depend on how much labor input you have. Okay? You increase labor input, it's going to be smaller. You decrease labor input, that's going to be higher. Okay? So, if you think of the individual firm's decision, how much labor input they should use, basically you can think of, okay, each firm has its own value of marginal product of labor schedule. Okay? It just basically tells us that if the labor input is this, okay, small, then value of marginal product labor is pretty high. And if the labor input increases, then value of marginal product labor is going to be smaller. Okay? And then what the profit maximization rule tells us is that the optimal labor input, the best quantity of labor input, is just to make that VMP equals to W. Okay? Which means that if you are given VMPE line, let's say if it's $10, let's say if its wage is $10, okay, you pick employment level that makes your VMP equals to 10. Okay, if it's let's say 5, that makes pick the employment level that makes your VMP equals to 5. Okay, so what tells us is that this VMP curve basically tells us how much labor input this firm gonna use. Okay, so VMP is actually labor demand curve. Okay, so once we know the VMPE schedule, then we know that how much labor input they're gonna use. Okay, questions? So in this case, VMP is no different from labor demand curve. Okay? So labor demand curve is determined by the value of marginal product of labor. That's what this says. Okay? So given W, the firm hires up to the point where VMP equals W. Okay? This is the standard theory of short-term labor demand. And labor demand curve is negatively sloped because marginal product of labor is negatively sloped. Okay? Meaning that when you have more inputs, marginal product of labor is decreasing. And since VMP curve is just labor demand curve must be decreasing and negatively sloped. That's the short-term side. Now, what is more interesting is the long run side. Let's think of long run. So in the long run, this firm can change labor input and capital input. Okay? To think of this one, we're going to introduce the concept of isoquant curve. What is isoquant curve? Okay. The isoquant curve is, iso means equal. Quant means quantity. So isoquant just means equal quantity. What is equal quantity? Equal quantity just means that the combinations of capital and labor input that produces equal quantity. Okay? So that is isoquant curve. So for example, you pick point X, then you have certain number of labor input and certain capital input. Okay? And then you can pick actually other points that makes the same amount output but using different combinations. Okay? For example, if they reduce the capital by delta K, and then if they increase labor input by delta E, then you get the same output. Okay? Then X and Y gives you same output. Then we can say that X and Y are on the same isoquant curve. So you can actually map out all the points that gives you the same output. Then we call it the isoquant curve. And isoquant curve is obviously negatively sloped, meaning that if you increase one input to produce the same output, you have to decrease the other input. If you increase both inputs, you cannot produce the same output. You will produce more output. If you decrease both inputs, you will produce less output, not the same. Okay? So isoquant curve must be negatively sloped. Another cannot intercept, okay, obviously, because if you intercept, then it's strange. E and K, right? If it's intercept, okay, that doesn't make much sense because, why? Because if A and B are on the same isoquant curve, A and B, same output. And A and C are same isoquant curve, A and C, the same output, right? So B and C must give you the same output because they are all equal to A, but it doesn't make any sense, right, if you look at the diagram. Because higher employment, higher capital, same output, that doesn't make sense. So it shouldn't be the case. Okay? So you cannot intercept. Okay, higher location indicates more output, obviously, because if you're higher in location, that means more employment, more labor, and more capital. So that means higher output. So farther away from this corner, the original corner, origin, then you have higher inputs. And it's convex to the origin because MPE and MPK each are decreasing. And the last one is the slope. Okay. We call this slope. Okay, so slope is the let's say, increase labor input a little bit. To be on the same isoquant curve, you have to decrease capital input. Okay? And that ratio is called marginal rate of technical substitution. Okay? So it's MRTS. Okay? Marginal rate of technical substitution. So it's just the ratio that makes this firm to produce the same output. Okay? By how much they have substituted each other. Okay? So that is actually same as the ratio of marginal product of labor to marginal product of capital. Okay, so that's the basics of isoquant curve. So isoquant curve gonna look like this. Then as slope, it just gives us MPE over MPK. Isocost lines is that isocost just means equal cost. Okay, so equal cost, as you can guess, is just a combination of capital and labor that cost the same amount of money to the company, to the firm. Okay, so obviously the isocost line should be negatively sloped, right? Because if you put more labor to pay the same amount in total, you have to decrease capital input. So isocost line gonna look like this line. Okay? Okay, so the isocost line indicates the possible combinations of labor and capital the firm can hire given a specified budget. Okay. Okay, so higher cost lines indicate higher, obviously, that if you're higher cost lines, then you put more capital and more labor, so it should cost more. Okay? So farther away, higher cost. Okay. The last thing is the slope. Okay, now think about it. How do you get the slope? Actually easy. If you have no capital input, let's say your cost is C0, and if you have no capital input, then your labor input gonna be the total cost divided by the wage. So that's C0 over W. Okay? So this is the maximum capital input the individual firm can have. Okay? No capital, only labor, C0 over W. So W is the unit cost of labor. And R is the unit cost of capital. So if the firm does not use any labor, only capital input, it's going to be C0 over R. Okay? So one extreme is C0W, the other extreme is C0 over R. And what is the slope? And then in between, you can actually put more employment but lower capital. Then you can draw a line. Then if you look at it, the slope must be W over R. Okay? It's a simple calculation. So W over R. Okay, so W over R. So we have isoquant curve, and we have isocost curve. Okay, then slope is equal to MPE over MPK, MRTS. The slope is W over R. Actually, they each have negative sign, but we just forget about the negative sign. Okay? And slope gonna be important. I mean, in economics, every diagram, slope is important. Okay, so we have seen isoquant and isocost. And first, let's think about now the individual firm's decision, okay, for production. Okay, what we are thinking is the cost minimization first. What is a cost minimization? Okay, let's think of this idea. Think of a firm who wants to produce a given quantity, let's say Q0. Okay. Let's say you're a Samsung Electronics, so you wanna produce, let's say, Galaxy Note 7, which does not explode anymore. Okay. Let's say you want, then you probably have a goal, right? You probably have a, let's say we should produce, let's say, 100,000 units per week or something. Okay, so let's say you are in charge of a production of a factory that gets orders, okay, from Samsung Electronics. Then the order says that, okay, produce 10,000 units every day, okay, for example. So your goal is to produce 10,000 units. Okay. Then what you have to decide, let's say you are in the long run situation. Okay. So you know in advance that you have to produce 10,000 units every day. So you're thinking that what you should do is that how should I combine capital and labor to produce 10,000 units a day? Okay. There are possibly infinite combinations you can think of. What is the best combination? The best combination must be the cheapest combination, right? You want to make money at the end, right? And as much as possible. So how do you do it? You have to produce at the lowest cost. Okay? That's the the goal that you want to achieve. Okay? How do you achieve it? Actually, now you know the isoquant and isocost. Actually, you combine them and you can actually figure it out. How? Now, first, you have a goal. Produce Q0, 10,000 units. Okay? And then you can think of every combination on it. Okay? And then you can figure out that what is the cost for each point on the isoquant line, isoquant curve. For example, let's say you think of point B or point A, that gives you Q0, production of Q0, then but you have one straight line, then this distance from here to here gives you the cost. Okay? Now you should ask, can I find the cheaper way to produce Q0 right? Then A and B. So what you do is that you actually try to shift this isocost line inward, right? So you just push it down and push it down and push it down, but you should not go over. You should be on the isoquant line, isoquant curve, right? What you should do, you should push it to the limit, which is point P, right? Obviously. So you have a goal of Q0, then you can figure out, okay, P is the best way, the cheapest way, or cost minimizing way to produce Q0. Okay. So what's special about this point? The slope is important, right? The slope of isoquant is equal to the slope of isocost. Okay? Make sense? So the cost minimizing solution P, the slope of the isocost equals the slope of the isoquant, or MPE over MPK equals W over R. Okay, that is the cost minimizing. Okay, combination. So using that rule, we can figure out that how much labor input this firm gonna use. In this case, 100 units. Okay, so this firm will hire 100 units to produce Q0. Obviously, this number of units is gonna change if this output changes. Let's say the order changes from 10,000 to 12,000. Then obviously you have to produce at a higher isoquant line, quant curve. Then you move it up, right? Then you probably hire more labor input. So this labor demand curve, okay, this labor demand will depend on, in this case, 3 things. One is actually 2 things. Given you have isoquant curve. One is the ratio of W to R, right? When wage changes, for example, or rent changes, this point gonna change. Another thing is the desired output. When it changes, then even W over R doesn't change, your labor input gonna change. Okay? So that's why we call it the conditional labor demand. So in this particular case of labor demand curve, so what we are going to do is, for example, that if the order is Q0, then when the wage changes, keeping the order constant, Q0 constant, then we can figure out that when the wage changes, how the labor demand is going to change. Okay? Now we can say that when the wage goes down, then they will use more labor and less capital. You will see later. So you can actually draw a labor demand curve that way. So given Q0, okay, you can draw what is the relationship between wage and the labor input. We call it the conditional labor demand curve because it is conditional on the output size. Okay? This labor demand curve is valid only when the desired output is Q0 units. It's 10,000 units. Then you have labor demand curve, conditional labor demand curve. If you have different units, then you will have different conditional labor demand curve. Okay? So from cost minimizing exercise, we can derive conditional labor demand curve. And this is going to be different from the labor demand curve we say, so we're going to talk about it in the next lecture. Okay? So today, this is it.